Welcome to the Group Home Riches Podcast. If you have the desire to be your own boss, create your own schedule, and become financially free while at the same time helping people in need, then you've come to the right place. At GroupHomeRiches.com, we teach people exactly like yourself how to get started in the group home business. And on this podcast, you're going to hear their stories firsthand. Welcome to the Group Home Riches Podcast. Today we have a VIP, very special guest. It's been I looked it over, it's been over 3 years since we've done kind of a one-on-one with our founder, Andy. So even if you've listened to that first interview, the very first interview we ever had, you may want to go revisit that. But Andy, welcome to the podcast. We wanted to have you on and kind of reintroduce you to the group and also get kind of an update, kind of a deep dive on what you've been doing since we've last had the one-on-one with you.
Yeah, definitely. Thanks for doing this.
Yeah. So we won't spend the whole podcast on just like your origin story since we did that already, but let's kind of start there. First, we'll just talk about real estate. What got you into real estate?
The reality is, just growing up, I saw people in my family lose their jobs, and I didn't want to experience that. I wanted to live a life on my own terms and be able to, it sounds a little bit corny, but, basically just create my own destiny. That was really the most important thing for me. I wanted to be able to do what I wanted, when I wanted, with whom I wanted, where I wanted. And I knew that I was not going to be able to do that in a normal 9-to-5 type job. So that's really the main thing.
And was that something you always had, or was there kind of a catalyst that brought that on?
I think that was how it always was. I mean, I remember as a young man thinking to myself, like, wow, I do not want to experience this when I'm older. I just don't want to experience this when I'm older, i.e. losing a job and trying to support a family. Like, I vividly remember that even as like little 9-10-year-old boy, seeing stuff that we were going through, and I'm like, I don't want to deal with that. I want to find a way to be rich, basically.
This is something I don't even know if we've talked about, but it just kind of makes me think. Did you have like a lot of little hustles when you were a little kid, or what was that like?
Yeah, I did. So starting out, and that seems to be a common denominator amongst a lot of these guys. But yeah, from the time I was a young guy, I mean, I was putting up flyers in the neighborhood. I think probably once I could start riding a bike in about 3rd or 4th grade, I would ride around the neighborhood with a bucket and, bucket, towel, and a little bit of car wash. And I'd knock on people's doors and ask if they wanted their car washed. So I was doing that probably when I was like 3rd, 4th, 5th grade. And then I remember, probably around 5th, 6th grade, I started making little flyers and putting them up in the neighborhood, basically offering to do, window washes and stuff like that. So I started doing that. And then a couple years later, there was a guy by the name of Mr. Fostu. I totally remember it. And he hired me like full time to come work for him one summer. And so I was hustling from a young age.
Nice. I think I always did like stuff around the house to earn money, but the first gig I think was when I was like 10 or 11 with a paper route. Yeah. Which was absolutely brutal. Every morning at like 5 or 6 in the morning, hopping on my bike 7 days a week during summer. But good learning experiences. But you kind of had the entrepreneurial spirit from a very young age then.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I was doing it again from probably 3rd. I would say I probably started doing stuff like that in about 3rd grade.
Nice. So we'll fast forward a little bit. After college, you got into like the corporate world, right?
Yeah. So corporate America, I was working at like a tech company, and it was just one of those things. So that's 2000. And I would say 3 or 4 weeks after I started, you started seeing like mass layoffs. And I'm going, you've got to be kidding me. Like, this is everything that that I did not want. Right. And so they start getting rid of everybody. And I have to figure out how to start putting resumes together. I start blasting resumes out to like monster.com, which was like a job board like 20 years ago that everybody used. And I figured out how to find headhunters, the whole 9 yards. Fortunately, I was able to basically stay at that company and work my way into a sales position. Now, everybody that I had been hired with, they all got fired. So there was like 10 of us, just give or take, and all of them, they all lost their jobs. So I was able to stay over there. I kept my job, and then I wound up being able to kind of scratch and claw my way into a sales position that eventually I did. At the time, I felt like I was doing very well. So I got into sales in corporate America. But then within that sales organization, I'm working with a bunch of guys that are, at the time, they're about my age now. They're in their late 30s, 40s, 50s. And I remember just seeing these guys, and some of them just looked dead. I mean, they looked absolutely dead. They looked like zombies, walking around with their khaki pants on and their button-up shirts. And I'm thinking to myself, this is not the life that I want to live over the course of the next 20 years. Now, the other thing that was very instrumental for me at the time was watching all these guys who were older just get absolutely devastated and wiped out in the stock market crash of 2000. So a lot of these guys were invested in the tech stocks and everything else, and they had families. And I was a young guy, I didn't have a family or anything like that, but I remember seeing these guys talk about how they had just gotten 30, 40, 50, 60, 70% of their net worth wiped out. And these guys were all investing in their 401ks and blah, 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 blah. And something just felt wrong about everything. The work environment didn't feel right to me. The stock market kind of investments didn't feel right to me. And I wasn't, I'm not like a finance expert by any means, but I would try to figure out, like, what are these guys investing in? Like JDS, Uniphase, and all these various companies. And like 9 out of 10 of them were scams. And so that didn't sit right with me. So that's really when I was like, all right, I got to figure out something else to do. And of course, read the Rich Dad, Poor Dad story like everyone else did. And I bought a condo for $58,000 in Dallas, Texas.
And that was the beginning of the empire.
That was the beginning. And look, it's all relative. I mean, there's always bigger, badder gunslingers out there. So I don't want to pretend that I have an empire compared to, a lot of these other guys. But the main thing is that I can live off my assets and do what I want, kind of when I want. So, but yeah, that was the genesis. That was the beginning of it.
Absolutely. And living off the assets and everything like that, it was an easy ride and probably just took a year or two, correct?
Oh my gosh, man. Yeah, no, definitely not. So I bought that condo, which I actually got ripped off on it. So that's a funny story. I paid 58 grand for it. And this realtor had shown me like 4 or 5 other properties, and they knew exactly what they were doing, playing the game, showing me these crappy condos for $65,000, $70,000. I'm like, I can never live here, and then all of a sudden they're like, oh, check this one out. It's $58,000. I thought it was the best deal I'd seen. Of course, I never was told by the guy that it was owned by him. And so he was the one that actually owned it and sold it to me, which I had no clue. I was, 21 years old or whatever at the time. So not only did he sell me a condo at an inflated price, but then 3 or 4 weeks afterwards, after I'd bought it, moved in there, I'm talking to one of the neighbors, and she's like, did you really pay $58,000 for that? Because these things only sell for $42,000. And
wow.
So yeah, this is just part of the game though.
So no analysis, no comps or anything like that. Just totally got the feet wet without even feeling the water.
This was my analysis at the time. I said to myself, okay, $58,000. I was able to get a loan because I had a $30,000 salary. And that's how I got the loan. I had some money saved up from doing all the stuff that I was talking about earlier. So I think my down payment was like $2,500 or something. But I knew that the mortgage payment after everything, the HOA fees and all that stuff, was going to be about, just give or take, like probably $675 a month. Well, I knew that I could get a roommate for $550. Yeah, so that's what I did. I mean, that's how I penciled it all together.
Cool. Hey, so it worked out.
Yeah, I can get a roommate for $550, and it'll cost me like $100 a month to live here.
So the first deal was what they would call a house hack, basically.
Yeah, that's what they call it in modern day parlance. Yeah.
Yeah. And then from there, it was, you just went and acquired a couple, just kept acquiring rentals from there, correct?
So I bought a few more condos over at that building, which, I mean, you go through all the trials and tribulations. I remember I had this guy, Alfredo, that I hired to like fix a broken window that one of the tenants had damaged when they were drunk and doing their thing. And I think Alfredo ripped me off, probably charged me $500 or so to like fix a window. But I had no clue what stuff should cost back then. I just didn't know. So yeah, you get poked, you get prodded, you get, there's a lot of potholes and corners and dips and valleys on the road to success. So lots of issues popped up, but I just, for whatever reason, I was pretty bullheaded, and I just, I was like, this is what I'm going to do. And I just, anytime something popped up that I thought was a good deal, like, I would try to buy them. I would save up money. I would just scrape money together. So I was trying to scrape together a couple thousand here, a couple thousand there, basically in $50 increments. And every time I had, call it about $4,000 saved up, I'd go buy another one.
And how much were these how much were they cash flowing if everything worked out and Alfredo wasn't ripping you off?
The interesting thing with real estate, and it took me a long time to figure this out, it's very, very, very elusive, very elusive. And I'm doing my numbers in my head. And of course, I'm not factoring in, at the time, I'm not factoring in vacancy or maintenance costs or any of that stuff. I'm just going, these are my rents. This is my principal, interest, taxes, insurance, and HOA fees. And this is how much I should make per month. But it never, ever, ever worked out like that. But I was a slow learner, and it probably took me 10 years to realize that. Probably less than 10 years. But look, you think you're making $300 a month, you're probably losing $200 a month.
Yeah, that's what I see with a lot of investors that go for that strategy. Their top line is going to be like $200 or $300 per month if everything works out perfectly.
Yeah.
And then they think, oh, I'll just buy like 5 to 10 condos and I'm going to have $2,000 or $3,000 in passive, quote unquote, passive income every month. And from all the people that I've spoken with and that I've known and that I've gotten deals from, because they sell their properties for like pennies on the dollar, it never works out that way.
No, it doesn't. It definitely does not.
So there's advantages to it though, right? Like you had equity in the property and everything like that. You learned how to invest. That's one huge thing, right?
Yeah. What you're able to build up between your ears is really, really, really important. That's almost more important than what you build up in your bank account. But yeah, I mean, basically, look, you do build equity up, you've got your depreciation. There's a lot of benefits that come with it. And I did buy in an area that was turning. And so that eventually, I don't want to say that like formed my investment thesis or anything like that, but I bought this condo and call it I would say maybe like a C- area. There was a strip club right down the street, really bad apartment building right down the road. And some developers came in and they bulldozed the strip club. So that was good. It was a real grungy strip club. And I think that helped to lift up the values. And so I would say, trying to do quick math on it, 2000, and then probably sold all of those things in about 2004. So within the course of about a 3.5 to 4 year period, I sold all the condos that I had. And I was at this point probably about 23. And I remember I walked with about $125,000, which, I mean, that was a big, big, big pop for me at the time. And I didn't touch any of that money. I basically parlayed all of it in a 1031 and moved it into an area that was actually relatively depressed. There was a lot of inventory on the market. And I think I bought, I don't know, about 10 properties or so, 10 houses with that. I also realized I would never buy condos again because I didn't want to be at the mercy of any of these HOAs. But yeah, that's really how it all started.
Yeah, so I think the buy and hold game is great, kind of long term, or for you it's kind of quick, good timing. But
yeah,
in the short term, when you were getting into it, were you thinking you were going to get a bunch of like passive income and have like a bunch of cash flow coming in?
Oh, of course. Yeah. I mean, that was my dream at the time. I remember sitting around going, oh, you know what? I'm going to have all this passive income coming in, and I'm going to take that passive income and I'm going to buy a Porsche with it.
Oh my God.
I mean, I'm a young guy at the time. And
Yeah.
I think this would be pretty cool. And the reality was, like, it was damn near impossible to really ever have the passive income coming in, right? You think you're making $200, $300 a house or whatever it was. For me back then, it was probably, in the $50 a month range, but it never really would come to fruition, right? You'd have a $50 a month, $50 a month, $50 a month, and then boom, you get wiped out with a hot water heater or whatever it was.
As far as like profit goes, not on the sale, but just on your rental income,
Yeah.
were you positive, do you think? Or after like taxes and maintenance and vacancies and everything like that, what do you think you were cash flowing when all was said and done?
And probably not much on those first deals. I mean, little by little, you start perfecting things. And, I'm fortunate because a lot of the labor, especially here in Texas, the inexpensive labor speaks Spanish. And so I speak Spanish. So I was able little by little to meet these guys, become friends with them, and get really good deals on my labor costs. And then eventually you wind up learning what stuff should cost to fix and cost to repair and everything else. And so you're no longer spending $500 for Alfredo to rip you off, putting in a window. You put in a window for, you go over to Home Depot and you buy a brand new one for 175, and you pay somebody 100 or 120 bucks to install it. But at the time I didn't know that. So
how many properties did you have before you realized, oh, wow, this isn't passive?
Right away. Honestly, it was like the first one, because I remember, wow. I say the first one I lived in. So it was the first like investment property, and it was at that same condo complex. And I moved a couple of guys in that were bartenders. Well, frankly, before I even moved them in, this is back pre-internet, right? So I remember trying to just lease properties out, and you'd put an ad up in the Dallas Morning News, and I would sit around all day hoping that people would come over. And then people would call you on the phone, tell you they're going to come. They would never come. It was the furthest thing from passive, the furthest thing.
You realized that on the first unit?
That was the first unit that I really I'm going, this is not what the books made it out to be.
Yeah. Let's fast forward to today's market, and, the same lessons apply for the most part. How many properties, just strictly, buy and hold, for your average person out there that's looking to quote unquote get into real estate? How many doors do you think they would need to have to actually live off of the cash flow? Is it even possible?
A lot of it boils down to how long you've owned them for, but let's assume that you started buying. If you bought 10 years ago in 2012, you're probably in a good position. And I would say, at that point, call it 30 of them just to be safe, because obviously rents are going to build up over time. But it's so elusive, and there's a variety of factors. If you're in California, you've got Prop 13, but on the flip side of the coin, so Prop 13, for those who don't know it, that basically keeps your taxes fixed. So you don't have to worry about your taxes eroding all of your profit. Now, the thing you have to take into consideration, though, is how many people had enough money to buy stuff in California, even during the recession 10 years ago. Like I never would have been able to do that. So now if you bought in somewhere in Texas or Arkansas or something like that, you're probably okay with 30 doors, but that's, it still takes a substantial amount of equity injection to even build up to that point.
So that's at least a couple years of holding and still kind of grinding out at your day job. And on 30 doors, if you're managing one of those things yourself, what does your day-to-day activities look like? I mean, is that a couple hours per week, a couple hours per day? What would you say?
You're going to have nonstop work orders. Again, it depends on the class of real estate. If you're talking C, B, A, chances are, look, the average person that's kind of starts off like I started off and starts off like most of our clients, they can't afford Class A stuff, right? So you're buying Class D, Class C, Class B minus, and those things are work order intensive. I mean, if you've got 30 houses, you're going to be driving all over town all the time. If you've got a 30-door apartment complex, you're not driving over town all the time, but you're just dealing with a lot, with a lot of riffraff, right? Whether it's, it really just runs the gamut, but there's going to be work orders every single day.
Yeah, going from my experience, it's nonstop. Luckily, I did a lot of networking before I got into real estate, and I also started out working in real estate. So I had a job with a property management company. So I was part of the day-to-day activities for the real estate investor. And it's just the amount of just miscellaneous phone calls, showing the properties, maintenance orders. It's just,
It's
you
it's
know,
nonstop.
yeah,
It's a nonstop. It's just a nonstop hustle.
I started working at an 80 unit property, and there were three of us that worked full time and couldn't keep up with everything. And that's counting, we also had, two managers above us and a full-time maintenance crew, a maintenance staff, along
So
with a construction crew too, right? And then a manager to manage the construction.
So
So
that's pretty interesting because when you were like, how many doors do you need? I threw out the number 30, and I just, that's just off the top of my head. But those numbers coincide with what you're telling me, right? You guys had 80 units and you had
yeah,
three people kind of overseeing it. So there you go. I mean,
we had three office workers managing the day-to-day stuff,
yeah,
and we were completely overloaded,
yeah,
as well as three managers above us and the maintenance staff and the construction staff. So
yeah,
that's give you guys an idea of what you're working towards if you are looking into getting into buy and hold. So we want to give you guys we want to give you guys the real deal here on this
yeah.
podcast.
You gotta know the real deal. And again, like you're saying, Brandon, there are a lot of benefits with owning this stuff.
Correct.
But then you have to educate yourself on that front as well. I mean, if you get to the point where they're paid off, I mean, there's a lot of people that have got paid off real estate, or it's got a lot of equity in it, but they're not sophisticated enough to even take it over to the local bank and say, yeah, I want a line of credit on this asset. They don't even know how to do that.
For me personally, I would consider doing it if I had or when I have, too much cash just sitting in the bank
Yeah,
collecting dust, right? You could put the money to work for you. You're not necessarily banking on the cash flow. It's just
yep,
something, you earn money, get assets, and in 10, 20 years, it's going to be nice.
yeah. And really that is the real estate game in a nutshell, right? It is the game that the very wealthy people play. But then the neophytes like myself 20 years ago were like, all right, I want to be rich. Rich people buy real estate. Let me start buying this stuff. And then, little by little, you wake up and realize, well, it's not really how it works. You can't go out and buy something. Look, you're going to get a return that typically is very similar to like a 10-year T-bill. And now you're actually getting less. If you go buy real estate right now, just because the market hasn't totally shifted yet, you might make 4 or 5% on your money. You go buy a 10-year T-bill or whatever, you probably make 6.5. But like, think about how wealthy you need to be in order to live off of 5% interest.
Yeah.
Like, you got $1 million, you're making 50 grand a year. I mean, 50 grand a year not doing anything is pretty nice, but it's most people with kids and everything else, they're not living fat on 50 grand a year.
So if the second to last step is to have a ton of cash in the bank, what is the first step to, really gaining acquiring wealth, long-term generational wealth? What's the first thing you need to find out?
In my personal opinion, it is generating money. You need to generate cash.
Bingo.
You need to find a vehicle that pumps money out. That's what you need. You need a slot machine. You need a broken slot machine that just pays out, pays out, pays out, pays out.
Again, luckily I learned from other people's mistakes when I was, again, just kind of researching real estate. I was like, man, this doesn't make sense. Like, how could I buy real estate and like it just does the numbers don't work, all the work that was getting out to it. So then I'm like, man, and you can't just buy real estate off the MLS typically. It's like,
Right.
so luckily, all of these questions led me to wholesaling. And that's when it clicked for me. Like, oh, I can just find deals, sell the deals. I don't need to be yelling at contractors all day long. I just sell the paper and bingo, my a cash vehicle was that's when I knew. That's when it clicked for me. Like, all right, this is a good cash vehicle. what was yours? Because you learned pretty quickly after that first unit, right? Like, oh man,
Yeah.
this isn't passive. It's not, I'm not getting that Porsche money. So what was your solution to upping up the cash flow?
Okay, so full disclosure, look, I had a job, right? I mean, the first thing I had was a job.
Right.
Did I like it? No. Was I willing to hustle and do whatever it took to make money doing that job? Absolutely. So that was number one. Now, when I eventually quit corporate America, I quit corporate America after I sold a property that I had actually converted into a group home. I sold that. That was like 2005. Then I left corporate America. And then I was sitting around going, okay, I need an actual cash vehicle. Well, obviously, what had I just sold that was generating cash? Group home. So I basically started taking these houses and converting them over to group homes. And I would say within probably 3 or 4 months, I had like $4,000 a month coming in. And at the time, this is quite a while ago, that was enough for me to live on. I was single. I think my overhead was probably, I could live easily for $1,500 a month, easy. Yeah, that was it. Yeah, that was it for me, running group homes.
Yeah. So just to put things in perspective, this was a time when a good corporate job was, the salary was like $30,000 and you were bringing in close to five from the group homes.
Well, I had the salary, but then what I also had were the commissions. So the commissions
Right.
really, really, really helped out. The commissions when they, I'd start getting, 750 here, 500 there, 1250 here, 1500 there. And I would just save up that money. And every time I had money saved up, I'd buy another property. And then to fast forward to the real entrepreneurial vehicle for me, that was the group homes.
Let's kind of rewind for anybody, for the new listeners, when they hear group homes, why don't you give kind of the elevator pitch on what is a group home? What do you mean by that? Who was living in the properties? Why was that generating more cash than your rentals? Just for anybody that's new, if you just stumbled onto this podcast or YouTube video and you hear group homes, I remember when I first heard it, it was like, what? How do you make more money doing that? Like, doesn't make sense. So why don't you break that down real quick for the folks out there?
Yeah, high level, when I say group homes, that's just the term that I use. You can, in a lot of respects, you can use it interchangeably with assisted livings, with care homes, with transitional homes, it really runs the gamut. What you're really doing in a nutshell, you're taking a house, if it's a 4-bedroom house, you're going to put 2 beds to a room, and you're going to have 8 tenants living in that property. And each tenant's paying $500, $600, $700, $1,000 a month, maybe more, just depending on the area and the location. And that is what I did. So that's what group homes are, or that's what I call them. And that's what I started doing. And by the time I had 3 group homes up and going, I was set. I was able to live off my own assets. I vividly remember being at a restaurant with my girlfriend at the time. And this is before all this stuff had really gotten going. I think I was probably on number 1. I'm like, this is how I'm going to do it. And we go back to that same restaurant. We're sitting at the bar drinking a margarita. And this is, 6 months after that first time we sat down over there. And I'm like, I'm good. I'm good. Like, I'm literally living off of my assets. I'm living off of my business income. And I've got extra money laying around. Like, life was good for me. And it was a really exciting time for me.
Yeah, I'm excited just hearing that story, because I don't know if I've even heard it broken down like that. So if we rewind to like the rental game, you estimated that you would need to get about 30 properties and take about 10 years in order to get to that point.
That's my personal opinion. Yeah. And that's still you.
Give or take, people, you might get lucky in the market. You might get some pops, but that's just to put things in perspective. And then when you figured out the group home strategy, it took, give or take, about 6 to 12 months to get to that spot. And four properties.
Within 6 months, I was ripping down $4,000 a month. It just happened real quick. And the only reason it took 6 months was because, we were going over to the Salvation Army, grabbing all the furniture, which we get for dirt cheap. But I was spending a decent amount of time laying tile, because I put tile in all the properties. I knew, I've got 8 people that are going to be living in these places. I'm not putting carpet in. So we'd go get the hacienda tile over at Home Depot for 68 cents a square foot, get the Versa bond. I mean, we're into the whole deal for maybe $1 a square foot. But that, that takes a little bit of time. I mean, if you go and you tile a 4-bedroom house all by yourself, and I'm not an expert doing it, it just takes a little bit of time. But yeah, within 6 months, we had all those beds fully occupied, generating money every single month.
And then obviously you learned how to find your teams and everything like that. How long did it take to the point where you were earning a really comfortable living? And if we go listen to the previous podcast where you were on, you would always say, yeah, I spend about a half hour on the business every month, which sounds crazy to people, but if you kind of do the math, you get the type of cash flow that these things generate. You have a lot more operating income. You could get teams, etc. How long did it take for you to scale to the point where you had a, really good cash vehicle coming in and it was basically passive for you?
I mean, within a year, I would say, but then look, by year, we just kept growing and growing and growing. So
Yeah.
what I would do, I was fortunate because I already owned real estate. I would just take my real estate that I own, and if I was renting it out to somebody on Section 8 or just a regular traditional renter, when their lease was up, I'm like, all right, well, let's convert this thing. So we would convert them to group homes. So let's say I had a 3-bedroom, 2-bath house. All of a sudden, I'm taking with like a garage on it. I'm converting that garage. I'm laying tile in it. Now I've got 5 bedrooms, 2 baths, and I've got 10 tenants living over there, paying me $700 a month, right? So now I got $7,000 of gross revenue coming in versus beforehand it was a 3.2 that was maybe generating 1,000, right? So I've got $7,000 a month coming in. Of course, my operating expenses are a little bit higher because now I'm actually paying for the utilities and the Time Warner cable and the Texas gas and all that other stuff. But the margins were enormous, right? I mean, and this is before the stuff really appreciated. So when I say appreciated, went up in value, right? We're still talking mid 2000s. So the property taxes were still pretty low, and these things were. It was just a cash cow business, is what it was.
I asked this question kind of tongue in cheek because I know the answer, but I still love it. For the folks out there that read about 20% returns on their rental properties and they think that that's a scam, what would you say the average ROI is on your group home business model on those properties?
I have a feeling you want me to use my saying, if it takes a calculator to figure out. But it's really true, right? I mean, calculator to figure out if it's a good deal. It's not a good deal. That's the way I looked at it.
Yeah.
These returns were infinite. I mean, I'd get all my money back usually in a couple of months.
Meaning you would put the cash into the property and you'd own it free and clear within a couple months.
Yeah, I'd have all my money back, right? I mean, so basically I would, for sake of argument, like let's say I'm going to tile a place up. It's a 2,000 square foot place. It's going to cost me $2,000 to tile it. I'll probably be able to fully furnish that thing for at most $500, right? Because I'm going over to the auction, getting all this stuff for dirt cheap. So now I'm into the thing for a couple $1,000s. I'm not spending really any money on marketing. Back then I was doing faxes. I would literally on a sheet of paper, I'd print something out and I'd just sit around and just fax it to all the local nonprofits. So marketing costs were next to nothing. Yeah, I mean, like just do quick math, right? I mean, if you put 10 people into a property and you're pulling in $700 per head per person, that's $7,000. You're running a 50% profit margin. You're making $3,500 a month net. Okay. Like worst case scenario, maybe it cost me $7,000 to get up and running, which it didn't. I'd have all my money back in 2 months. Like 2 months, I'd have all my money back. So to me at the time, as a young man, I'm like, this is what I'm going to do. This is the smartest thing for me to do.
And it worked out.
It worked out extremely well, extremely well.
Yeah. So for the new listeners, if you're just joining us, new to our content, you probably have a ton of questions running through your mind. We have so much content breaking down how this works, what you need to do to get started, the legality behind it. I'll give you, just a really short answer. There is no license or anything like that required. We're not going to get into the the nitty gritty kind of detail, showing you how the sausage is made on this podcast. So if you're just joining us, check out all the other content, the other interviews, check out our YouTube channel where we really do a deep dive onto the kind of details on how to get something like this going. So we've heard kind of like the origin story of your business, Andy. You weren't retired, right? You weren't just sipping margaritas on the beach. You know, you had to manage this thing. You had to scale it. I'm guessing you did have some free time, and as a natural born entrepreneur and hustler, got into other projects, which is kind of why we're here, right? So why don't you tell us a little bit about, you know, why Group Home Riches? How did that come about?
Yeah, I mean, long story short, I think really what happened was, you know, I keep things pretty close to the vest, but there were people that knew what I was doing, and they liked the business model, and they knew, right? I mean, my bankers knew it, because that was the other real beneficial thing with this business. When the last recession hit in 2007, 8, 9, basically all of the real estate finance dried up. But what did not dry up was business lending, like SBA loans and stuff like that, especially if it was business lending backed by real estate. So people kind of in the community and just people that I was friends with, they knew what I was doing. So people would ask, what are you doing? Hey, can I tell my friend about what you're doing? Can my friend call you? Blah, blah, blah. So yeah, eventually I set up a website, a real horrible looking website a long time ago. And next thing I knew, people were opting in to the website to learn a little bit more about how to set these things up. And a couple years went by and there was more people on the list, and a couple more years went by and there was more people on the list. Then eventually you and I crossed paths, and yeah, the rest is history, right? I mean, that's what we're doing now. So that was really the genesis of Group Home Riches.
And it's kind of funny how we cross paths. So I kind of mentioned how I was doing wholesaling now, and just kind of this will kind of give people kind of an inside glimpse of the properties and stuff too. So the majority of your properties, they're in those transitioning neighborhoods, right? Where you would see like a lot of investments going on, rentals, et cetera, flips, right? It was probably like the areas were probably close to B-class neighborhoods at the point. But I remember driving for dollars, which if anybody's researching how to invest in real estate, you've probably come across this strategy. But you drive the hot neighborhoods and you look for the homes that kind of need a rehab, and then you send letters to those owners. So
yes,
Andy's properties, for this model, it doesn't really make sense to do big, fancy, modern rehabs, right?
No,
so
not at all.
From the outside, the properties just look like, oh, you know, these probably old people maybe getting ready to retire, and the home clearly needs a rehab. But on the inside, because there was no, you know, little to no deferred maintenance, even though the stuff might not be modern inside, everything was just working great and functioning and everything like that. But long story short, I was probably hounding you for your deals. I know we found there were a whole bunch of emails of us going back and forth, and I'm sure I was just blasting you with yellow letters. So that's kind of a fun story.
Yeah, which is the common theme, right? I mean, you start buying this stuff and you own it, and next thing you know all these wholesalers. So
yeah,
that was how we originally crossed paths.
And kind of to your point, back when like people figure out what you were doing, the bankers, your friends, other investors, everybody was like really curious about it, right? And there was, even today, there's almost no information about there. So
it's the strangest thing. Like, a lot of people don't really know about this industry, even though they probably should. But for whatever reason, they don't really know too much about it, you know? But yeah, it's a great business. Great business.
Yeah. So there's like the ALF model, right? The assisted living facility where you're providing the care. There's the co-living model. So that's one of the new buzzwords, cooperative living, where if you look up, folks out there, head to coliving.com and you'll see just there's a lot of big startups that are getting into this, but advertising mainly to the general public, right? Like young professionals and people like that. I would describe this as kind of a blend of those two models, right?
Yeah.
But the advantages are no license required. You're not providing like the actual healthcare. All that stuff is outsourced. And then, rather than chasing down a bunch of like young new college grads that might not be making a ton of money, you're basically getting checks either directly or indirectly from the government. With
Checks direct from the government. And this is the other thing that I've continued doing. We like that model. It's affordable housing in a nutshell.
Yeah. So fast forward to just recently. So why don't you tell the folks what's been going on now currently with the properties and some of the new projects you're getting into, and then we'll kind of get why you're doing these things. And I wanted to touch on kind of the future of the real estate market as well. So
what I have done, I think you eventually get to the point where you look at this stuff and you're like, yes, I can have all my money back in 2 months, but it is a little bit more operationally intensive than you may have time for. When you're young and you're like super hungry and you don't have any money, you're going to do anything you can to get things going. But eventually here's what happened with me. I continued buying these properties, these group homes in these, call them, D grade, C grade areas. And I would always try to buy in the path of progress, number one. And then number two, I'd always try to make them nicer, right? So I could actually, create some value. So if I was buying something for, 50, 60, 70,000, I pump a little bit of money into it. And maybe now all of a sudden it's worth 100. But then little by little, as the area got nicer, that property went from, call it 100 grand or 90 grand to 130, and then 150, and then 200. And then if you get lucky, which obviously I did get a little bit lucky, the values can go up even more. So what I eventually started doing, because I wanted to keep the business because it was a really good business. So what I started doing is refinancing these properties and pulling money out. So I started taking all that money out, and, just for sake of argument, if you take, again, for sake of argument, you take $100,000 out, and for some people that'll sound like a small amount, for other people that'll sound like a large amount. But if you take $100,000 out, you can use that to go set up a few more group homes, which I probably did a few times, or you can start doing things with that money. And so what I personally started doing with that money, sometimes I would buy properties and just rent them out. But other times, most of the time, what I would do is I would take that money and I would lend it out. So I would lend out that $100,000 or, more. And, so if my debt costs on that were, call it 4 or 5% back then, I could lend that money out at maybe 15% or 17% or 20% and then pocket the spread. So all of a sudden your $100,000 that you pulled out, you're making 15% net interest margin on that. You're making $15,000 a year on that. And so that's really what I started doing a lot of.
beautiful. For maybe like the beginners out there, what do you mean by refinance? It's similar to what you just broke down as the BRRRR method, which some people might kind of be familiar with.
Yeah. So basically what you're doing is, if you had bought the property for, call it $50,000, and now all of a sudden it's worth 100,000, or maybe let's do a little higher. Let's call it 120,000. You take that property back over to the bank and you say, hey, Mr. Banker, I'm going to give you my property. It's worth 120,000. How much money will you give me for it? And the banker's going to give you 100,000 bucks at, call it 5% interest. So all of a sudden, even though you bought it for 50 and you were paying 5 or 10% interest on it or whatever it was, now since the bank knows it's worth a lot more, they're going to give you $100,000 in cash, and you give them that property. You pay the bank back every year. Obviously we can run it on a monthly basis, but on an annual basis, you're paying the bank back 5,000 bucks. But then what you're going to do is you're going to take that $100,000 and you're going to do something that will generate even more than that $5,000. So that's your spread. And that becomes, especially if you're making loans with it, it's very, very, very passive, very passive.
Yeah. And so you can go work, you can make the money work for you at, say, 15 to 20%. Or
absolutely. Yeah.
Or you could take that cash and repeat with the group home model, right? And we've already calculated what the ROI is on that cash. It's right. Infinite, right? Then you can you scale that. And this is something with this business, you could do it pretty quickly. I mean, it took you like a year to get like four or five properties. One of the recent interviews we did, Orlando, right? Yeah, I think
Yes.
he did 12 properties in his first year, and now he's building an apartment complex. So
Right.
once you do get that cash vehicle, there's a lot of cool things that you can do with it. So what are you doing now? Kind of scaling back on the group home model per se, the individual residential homes.
Right.
What are
So
what are you taking a road trip for today?
yeah, so scaling back on the group homes, and the primary reason why I'm scaling back on that is because the taxes are up significantly, right? So these areas that used to cost 50,000 are worth a lot more now. And so what we've done, fortunately, we still have really good relationships with a lot of these nonprofits. And so I basically, again, I'm doing, I would say, three different things. One of the things that I'm doing is I'm taking the money from these little houses and I'm moving them into, it's like Monopoly, right? I mean, you've got one or two little homes or three or four homes on Baltic Avenue, and then all of a sudden, you want to buy one hotel. Same sort of concept. So we've been buying larger properties, right? I mean, so we'll take three or four little houses, or I will, and we'll pump it into a large building. And those large buildings, we still have good relationships with all these nonprofits. And so they're sending us their tenants. And so now, rather than having these people share rooms, they'll get their own efficiency apartment or with a kitchenette and everything else, or one bedroom, one bath. And so I'm doing a decent amount of that. I'm still making loans. So what I'll do is I'll, pull out equity from these properties and I'll make loans to people. I like making loans, and we do a certain type of loan. It's not your traditional hard money loan or high interest loan. It's more of a partnership type loan. And obviously we could go into that in detail if you'd like. And then the other thing we'll do is we'll buy stuff. And then right now it's very difficult despite what the media may say, it's very difficult for a lot of people to get financing for properties. And so we'll buy stuff and then we'll finance it to them. And that's very beneficial for them because traditionally speaking, they can't go over to the bank because they don't have the down payment or they don't have the credit history or whatever it is. But we know the asset that we're lending on, and we'll make loans to these people at they're higher rates than you're going to see the banks charge, but they're still, it's still affordable for them. So I would say those are really the three primary things that I'll do.
Let's talk about the larger properties that you're
Mm-hmm.
doing. So as a cash vehicle, if you're just doing your rental model and you got 10, 20, 30 doors all spread around the city, you're making $200 or $300 on a great month. That's not, we've already talked about that. It doesn't seem like a great, lifestyle choice. However, if you have like a 90 unit, 90 doors, and they're cash flowing a couple $100, that
Yeah,
makes a little more sense, right?
absolutely. Especially if you're the person at the top, right? I mean, back in the day when you were at that 80 unit building and it was you and the two other maintenance people and,
Oh, it's a nightmare.
yeah,
It's a nightmare.
but for the person that owned it, they're not doing any of the work. And so there's enough revenue coming in off of it for them to pay you and those two other people and the maintenance staff and all those folks to babysit it. So that's essentially what we're doing right now, right? So like I'm actually parked in front of one of this is like a hotel conversion, and I'm leaving now to go drive over to another one, but I'm parked in front of this thing right now, and this thing is 68 units, and look, it's just like a little economy hotel is what it was, and we are converting it to essentially to affordable housing is what we're doing. And so we ran gas lines, so we're going to put not in every single unit, but in a lot of the units we'll wind up putting ranges in, ovens, and that'll give us an additional probably $55 a month on, give or take, call it about 48 units. That cost us $68,000. I'm sorry, 16,000 bucks. But you can just do quick math. I mean, we're trying to make little decisions like that where you just get your money back super, super, super fast. But that property right there is, it's a good example of it's just a little bit more scalable. This is what I'm trying to do. Basically get rid of the smaller stuff, move it into larger stuff, still provide quality, safe, affordable housing for the demographic that I was working with before, but also a new demographic.
Talk about kind of the demand for that. Why would you continue the relationship with the nonprofits that you have, and instead of just renting to, your average bartender? You use that example, or, your average typical tenant that most people picture in their mind.
Right. Well, number one, the demand, I'm telling you, it's insatiable no matter where you go. People they want cheap housing. That's really what it boils down to. They want cheap, affordable, safe housing. And if you're able to get deals at good enough price points, you're going to be able to provide that. And if you're able to get larger deals, like that 90 unit building that we've got, this little 68 unit, I mean, we're looking at another one that's like 168,000 square feet. I think that one's 141 units. I mean, you can really help out a lot of people, but you can also help, help out yourself. But it just becomes easier. That's the real answer, Brandon. It becomes easier because now all of a sudden, for example, over at that 90 unit building, I've got 2 security guards that are working 24 hours a day. One handles the day shift, one handles the night shift. I've got a girl at the front office. I've got a guy that oversees everything. And we've got multiple maintenance staff. And this thing's, I don't know, a couple hundred miles away. So I'm just not nearly as involved as beforehand. And I like that. And I'm also able to cut more people in on the deal. So, what I like to do is give people a little piece of the action, because that's the way that I was kind of trained. I had some guys that helped me out back in the day, and, they said, all right, you got to do all the work, but you're going to get 15 to 30% of the deal, depending on the deal that I did. And that was beneficial for me. And so I tried to do the same thing, because you do get to a point where, I mean, if you're like super greedy and you want to take everything, that's possible, but it also becomes a pain in the ass. So, but if you start giving away pieces of the action, you're going to be able to do less work, and make more money long term.
It's like an investment, right? You're investing in talent that will eventually come back to you.
Exactly.
Now, I remember I kind of worked back to like the property management company. I worked my way up to a much larger one that they had. They had like 400 units. I think you know the property that I'm talking about. It kind of looked like the projects kind of, but I remember, and again, the whole staff, even though I wasn't part of the office staff, I was kind of overseeing the construction at this point. But it was still, they would take everybody, the maintenance workers that weren't busy, and we'd all need to go post scary letters on the doors of the tenants from like the 1st through the 10th. And this was qualified people, right? They had good credit. They had full-time jobs, good rental history, no criminal background, right? So you're quote unquote qualified tenants. So even then, we would still have to, it take almost the whole staff to just send out all the reminder letters like, hey, rent is due, right?
Yep.
So why don't you break down for the people, what's it like when you're offering affordable housing to people that might not necessarily be qualified? What's the advantage of doing that when it comes to collections?
Yeah, the beauty of it is that we don't really have to worry about collections from those people, from that demographic. And I'm emphasizing from that demographic because, look, if they're getting paid basically by the government, or the government is paying you to house these people, you don't have to worry about it. I mean, the government's got, they've got pockets that just never run out. I mean, that's the beauty of socialism, is that, you never run out of other people's money. Now, when you do run out of other people's money, that's when you got to be worried.
Well, that's when we're heading to the bunker. So
yeah, exactly. But that's really the way it goes, right? I mean, so we've got individuals that are part of various programs within the 5-county region, and there's so many different programs. So they're part of these programs, and it's whether it's families in crisis, there's so many. And it's going to depend on where you live. I mean, if you're in Cleveland, Ohio, there's going to be different programs than if you're in Waco, Texas. But nonetheless, I mean, it's government funded housing is what it is. And yeah, I mean, you don't have to worry about evicting those people is what it boils down to. Now, you may have to worry about evicting them if they start misbehaving or doing crazy things at the properties. But
Of course,
from a rental standpoint, you don't have to worry about it.
that comes with your traditional housing as well, though.
It does. Absolutely.
I
Absolutely.
don't know if I told you the first call I ever had to take at that large property. Have I told you?
Yeah, probably. But I mean,
My very first day, the first call in the office,
okay.
was a person. It was like at 8 a.m. Right, like the office opened. I pick it up, and a guy just starts screaming at me because we haven't patched up a bullet hole quick enough.
Yeah.
So, and this was like a nice apartment complex. Everybody's qualified. So when you're dealing with a lot of people, crazy stuff's gonna happen.
Right. Yeah, you're dealing with human beings. Exactly.
Yep. we're a weird species for sure.
Mhm.
I think another advantage that I think, and correct me if I'm wrong, what did you kind of plan on your vacancy rate being with your traditional rentals?
Well, like I was telling you at the beginning, I didn't even factor that in. Like I didn't know any better, right? I mean, I was like, oh yeah, it's good. It's just going to be revenue minus PITI. But you quit factor. You don't even know. You don't know what you don't know. But realistically, you need to be running, call it a 5 to 10% vacancy factor.
Okay, and I think that's pretty good. I think compared to other companies. I was speaking with a organization. I forgot where it was, but for one of the our done for you clients, and one of the organizations, they said they had like 1,200 people on their waiting list.
Yeah.
It was just closed. So, back to the demand portion of this, what's like the feedback that you're getting from these nonprofits and the organizations that you're networking with?
It's insatiable. I mean, there is so much demand for this type of housing. It's incredible. And really, no matter where you go, I mean, even in small little podunk towns, I mean, people want cheap, affordable rent. That's what they want. That is what they want.
Just for the sake of the argument, or to give you an example for the folks out there, if you were to build 5 more properties like the one you're at right now, think your connections now could be able to fill them all up.
In a heartbeat.
Yeah. They
In a heartbeat. I mean, they get these things filled up in a second, because how many people out there are offering all bills paid for $500 to $600 a month? It's almost impossible.
Yeah, I remember the company that I worked with, it's kind of sucks, and I'm sure it's probably common in the industry. There's ways to kind of tiptoe around this, but they would make it pretty hard just to work with Section 8 folks.
Oh,
so, yeah. And, if it were like a nonprofit and they were to call us like about working with them, they, unfortunately, they weren't even going to get the time of day.
No, they're not going to. So that's another reason why I like this industry and this niche, because once you get to know these people, you get to know the police officers, you get to know the nonprofit heads, the nonprofit chairs. I mean, they're just going to start sending you all of their people, and they will show you how to expedite getting paid, and they'll show you how to expedite everything. But the average organization, I mean, they don't know how to do it. They don't have the means to do it.
And it's also, this is kind of where we come in with Group Home Riches, right? I mean, you listen to the real estate podcast, the blogs. How many people are talking about doing this kind of thing?
Nobody's talking about doing it. Nobody knows how to do it. It's not even on their radar. It's not on their radar. But guess whose radar it is on? It is on every governor's, every mayor's, every city council member's radar. This is all they care about. This is their top priority: housing, affordable housing.
Yeah. So
let me come in, and I'm going to come in, and I'm going to be the one that provides housing for all of these people that, by the way, are going to be voting for you.
So that's a great segue. Let's talk about the real estate market and kind of the future of housing, and where you see the future of this industry going. Let's touch on the overall macro real estate market, and we won't do a deep dive on it, but why don't you give us kind of short version of where you see things headed?
Yeah, look, I'm no expert. I'm not a data scientist. All I can tell you is we're going into a slowdown period, right? So interest rates have gone, give or take, they were down in the 2% range. Now they're in the 7% range. So we're talking about a 500 basis point bump very, very, very quickly, like super quickly. So that's already having an impact on the market. Things are slowing down dramatically. So that's kind of number one. It's going to make properties more unaffordable. People can't go out and buy stuff. Beforehand, they could go buy the $150,000 property at 3%. They cannot afford that property at 7, 8, 9, 10, 11%. It's unaffordable. So it's going to slow down the amount of people buying properties. It's going to slow down the building big time because builders, they're not going to be building properties if they know that they can't turn them over. Number two, even from an apartment development standpoint, I mean, the guy that was building or developing apartments, he was borrowing money at 2, 3% floating. Now he's borrowing money at 8. So the game is totally changed. It doesn't work anymore. So look, there's a lot of headwinds coming our way. The other thing is it's becoming just difficult in general to make money. People are making less money despite what you may hear out there on the radio and elsewhere in the national media. It's becoming more difficult to make a living. So what do people need? They need affordable housing.
And where do you see the future of that industry going?
Man, long term, look, it's so difficult to say, but there's definitely going to be more government owned housing. There's going to be more government controlled housing. You're going to see, city councils, city governments start taking over buildings and what have you. But at the end of the day, you're going to see more people, more kids bunking up with their parents, more parents bunking up with their parents. It's going to be very similar to Europe. That's my personal opinion. And I think that group homes, care homes, whatever you want to call them, are going to be one of the solutions to this problem.
Let's kind of rewind. Let's say you were in your corporate position today, just coming out of college, someone that was curious about real estate investing, what would be your game plan? With the current state this time, what would you do?
This is what I would do. I would go out, I'd start hunting for properties because I would want to buy them. And knowing that you can't get financing for them or the numbers don't really make sense anymore, I would be looking to try to convince sellers to seller finance me stuff. That's what I would do. I'd try to, stuff will be sitting now, right? Beforehand, it would sell in a month, 2 months. Now things are going to be sitting on the market for 6 months, 8 months, 12 months. These owners want to get rid of this stuff. So you're going to have to come in there and rescue them in some capacity. Hey, I know you want $150,000 for your house. You're unable to do that. Why don't you do this, Mr. Seller? Finance me that property, seller finance me that property for 100. I'll pay your price. I'll pay 150 grand, but give me a 2% interest rate loan. If you do that 10 times, you're going to get 1 or 2 yeses. And then I would take over that property. Now I actually own the property and I've got a super, super, super low interest rate on it. So I can principal pay down the thing real fast. And then I'd start running them as group homes. That's what I would do. 2, 3, 4 properties. Next thing you know, you're free. You're making way more money than you're going to make in corporate America. And it's a more stable form of income as well.
And just my personal opinion, looking at trends, I don't see the affordable housing thing, the demand for it going down anytime. Like you kind of mentioned, like the government funds for the folks out there, just look up, affordable housing crisis and news, and you're going to see this state puts this much amount of money into it. The government, the federal government puts this much amount of money into it. I don't know, if you were to estimate, how much do you think is allocated to go towards affordable housing?
Oh, it's billions and billions and billions of dollars per year. You've got LIHTC subsidies. It's incredible. The overall amount of money that's being pumped into this industry in this space it's off the charts.
And if you want to play this game, kind of how we do it, what we do for some of our clients or show others how to do is basically you want to follow the money. right? You want to,
Yep.
it's going to go from your federal government to the state, then it's going to get allocated to all these nonprofits and social
Yep.
service organizations. And we
Yes.
kind of touched on that, right? So those are the relationships that you have locally.
Yes.
Yeah. When they do get a call from a potential real estate investor that wants to partner with them, what's that like?
I
What's
mean,
your, how
it's
do they
it's
typically
easy, right?
receive?
Because
Yeah.
they are typically reaching, they have typically, these people have landlord outreach specialists, because 9.9 out of 10 landlords don't want to deal with it. They don't want to deal with it. They don't know about it. They're scared about it. They've heard the horror stories or whatever. So they typically will have a landlord outreach specialist. What you are doing, and what we, what I've done and what we train people to do with Group Home Riches, is actually reach out to those landlord outreach specialists and reach out to the people at those nonprofits and educate them about what you are doing. Hey, I've got a house. It's a 4-bedroom, 2-bath house, fully furnished. Do you have any clients that are in need of housing right now? Actually, I do. And by the way, we have, they've got $1,000 a month to allocate towards their housing costs. Perfect. Can you send me 8 of them? Yes, I can. Next thing you know, you're looking for another house.
And if you're talking to the right people, it's not like they have just 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 clients at a time.
Oh,
Like,
they've got hundreds of clients.
yeah,
Each nonprofit has got hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of clients.
realistically, when was the last time you had to do a lot of like outbound marketing and finding new connections?
Never. It's been more than a decade.
Right. So I did it a little bit when we first started working together. I'm doing it way more now with our done for you clients,
Right.
way more boots on the ground. I'm actually making these calls for our clients to just kind of show them, how to speak with these people. You don't even necessarily have to have a property yet. In fact, the majority of our clients don't.
Yeah,
But
you don't need to.
all we say is, hey, we're a new real estate company. We plan on, opening a couple properties over the next couple of months. I see that you have a blah, blah, blah program. I'm just calling to get more information on that. Literally, one of the woman I spoke with the other day, like the first thing that she said was, oh my God, you've made my day.
Yeah, yeah. These people fall in love with you.
Yeah.
I mean,
And then
you're like a blessing for them.
and you obviously have to build rapport with them. You can't just, if you're in it to be kind of a slumlord and just get quick cash and thinking it's going to be passive in the beginning,
It
you're not
doesn't
going
work.
to. Yeah, it's a relationship business, right? And think about your goals. Tell them what your goals are, what you want to do, what brought you to this in the first place, right? When they hear that you're serious about it, hey, I plan on doing like 4 or 5 properties in my first year, which pause. It's not uncommon. You can go through all the previous podcasts. Anybody that kind of hustles, 10 to 20 hours per week, put it into this. That's a very common result. And most of them, like Andy, they typically kind of become semi-retired at that point, or at least retired from the rat race, right?
Yes.
So, and then you just kind of pitch them the game plan, which I believe after speaking with what you're doing now, Andy, Orlando, a couple of our other recent guests, and working with the people that are the boots on the ground. Hey, I do plan on doing the cooperative shared living model for the first couple of properties, but in the future, I do plan on getting into development projects, multifamilies, et cetera. And there is a huge need for that, the single units,
Yes.
people that want, or they need a single unit, especially if it's, women with children, right?
And there's government subsidies for it as well. I mean, you can just just type in like single room occupancy on the internet and the area that you live or the city that you live in. It'll pop up. I mean, there's a ton of HUD money going to SRO housing.
And just just a quick email, hey, who can I talk to? You get on a call like that. Had a call. Well, we have a client in Baltimore, Andy. It took like 2 emails, 1 Zoom call, and we're connected with the mayor's department of housing.
Yeah, there you go. That's the beauty of this done for you program, that we're setting up for people, is that we really are I mean, we're doing it for them.
It's funny. Again, just kind of a glimpse. We do want to give you guys kind of the real deal. I mean, we're telling you, showing you how the sausage is made, the advantages, the disadvantages. And that client, we actually have a meeting later today where we're going to be pitching an investor. You brought up the seller financing aspect, Andy.
Yeah.
So that's this client's situation. We're talking to an investor later today about seller financing, like a 15 bedroom multifamily property. So you get the connections. Now we're going to go find the properties, and boom, if that deal goes through, we already have connections to fill that property and build a wait list for the next couple of them.
Yeah, you're putting two and two together. I mean, and we walk people through how to do it, and not only walk them through how to do it, we do it for them. I mean, that's why it's the done for you package.
Yeah,
But this is where I see it all going.
Yeah, it's a lot of marketing. You kind of touched on it back in the day. You were doing faxing,
Yep.
faxing all the time. Probably a lot of door-to-door stuff. We kind of just take we take like the internet marketing that we've learned with Group Home Riches, and also, with the real estate investing thing. Obviously, times have changed. There's so much software and digital stuff that you can be doing. We take that and apply it to this model for our done for you clients. So yeah, it's exciting times. You could just go through and read some of our recent success stories. And with the way the market is now and what we kind of foresee it happening over the next couple of years, these are the times where
fortunes are made. I mean, this is really when fortunes are made. And the group home space industry, whatever you want to refer to it as, I mean, this is where not only you're going to make your fortune, but this is where the cash flow is going to separate the wheat from the chaff. I mean, you will make more cash flow running group homes than anything else. And yeah, you could swoop in and buy up a lot of real estate over the course of the next 12 to 48 months, in my opinion.
Yep. My opinion is about to be a garage sale. We don't have to get into the technicals or anything on this podcast. Obviously, I'm not, like you said, I'm not economics major or anything like that, but you can kind of see all the signs.
Yeah, it's out there.
So we'll wrap things up. I know you got to walk the property and kind of check on things. What do you have planned? What are your plans for the future? What do you plan on doing in this upcoming market?
Look, I all I'm doing right now is I'm going to refinance some stuff. I'm going to basically put the cash into a bank account. I was planning on selling earlier this year, and I got busy. I didn't get around to it. So I'll refinance. I can still take advantage of my relationships with the local bankers, and then I'll look for stuff to buy. That's really what I'm planning on doing. And look, the other good thing is when things slow down, it does give you an opportunity to focus on other things, right? Because right now the deals really have not started popping up, and the interest rates are higher. So you just got to sit around and wait. So take this time, enjoy yourself, enjoy your family, focus on the important stuff. And then, when the time is right, we'll be ready to pounce.
Absolutely. So for the folks out there, if you are interested, hopefully we've piqued your interest. If you've made it this far and you haven't, and you're not on our mailing list, bare minimum, head over to grouphomeriches.com, sign up for the free guide. That's going to be emailed to you. That'll break down all of the burning questions that are in your head right now. So how does it work? What's the opportunity? Why is it legal? The laws that we follow, et cetera. How to outsource, how to get started, how to acquire properties, especially if you have little to no money. How do you get into this business if you are check to check, right? And you don't have savings. We have a ton of success stories of people in that same situation that have now, again, first year, they become kind of semi-retired. So grouphomeriches.com, sign up for the free material. If you've already learned the basics through our free content, again, on YouTube or everywhere podcasts are, and you are ready to pull the trigger, bare minimum, get our gold course. It's only $199 at the time of recording. With that, we've really compiled as much info as possible, as much resources, all in a digital library for you. So much gold in there. I'll just give you one example of how you're going to 10x your money on that. We have Andy talked about kind of relationships with bankers. We have the original pitch deck that he has in the Gold Course. that alone is worth the price. And they're
that's worth $10,000.
Yeah, exactly. And there's so many examples of that, right? So I won't get into that. Go read our reviews. The results speak for themselves at this point. Bonus to that is you get access to our private Facebook group. There's over 2,000 members in there, people from all stages of the business, networking, helping each other, sharing details and things that work for them, what doesn't, etc. You see marketing material that they're using. That alone, you could probably learn everything you need just from that Facebook group, to be honest. And then from there, we offer a number of different coaching options to really fast track things if you're looking to kind of pay for a shortcut. Yeah, everything from us hopping on the phone with you to kind of guide you through it, to even, putting our team to work for you. So if you're curious about those, reach out to us. Either my email is brandon@grouphomeriches.com and Andy's is andy@grouphomeriches.com. But either way, we're excited about the future, our future here with Group Home Riches, as well as just the future of the industry. Show you guys how to get rich while everyone else doesn't. So, it's the cold hard truth. So, Andy, do you have any parting words for folks out there?
No, just, look, don't sit on the sidelines. I mean, take action and go quickly. I mean, if you think that this is something that you would like to do, block out everything else and just go do it, and do it quickly. Right now, take some action, get off your ass and go buy the Gold Course. I mean, it doesn't cost much. Go buy the Gold Course, start looking through everything. Don't let it just sit there. Start looking through everything and start studying it. And then either go do it and implement it on your own, or call Brandon and I and let us do it for you. Or at least go listen to a couple of our clients that have had a lot of success with us setting these things up for them.
Yep. You could literally email our team, ask, hey, this is where I'm at. Where do I start? We'll guide you along the way via email. Another bonus, you get online support with the Gold Course. Really no excuses at this point. So reach out to us. We look forward to working with you. Andy, thank you so much for your time. We'll need to keep the people posted with these new projects. I'm excited to see how they end up.
Well, yeah, you just got to drive up here with me. I mean, these things are at full occupancy. So now it's just about buying more of them. Yeah.
That was quick.
Yep, exactly.
All right. Awesome. Thank you so much, man. We'll check in with you soon.
Perfect. Thanks, Brendan. Bye.
Yep.
Want to learn more about the future real estate? Sign up for your free training material at www.grouphomeriches.com.